Hey guys, I'm Philip from the Honda Resource. Thanks for joining me on this episode. On this episode, I'm going to show you how you can take your busted shocks off of your Honda Element and you can replace it with a new unit. Alright, also on this episode, we're going to be doing the front and the rear. So if there's a portion that you're not interested in, scroll on the timeline at the bottom. It'll show you where the front ends and the rear begins. In this episode, I'm going to show you the tools you'll need, the parts you'll need, and I'll give you the knowledge so that you can do this right at home in your garage. Stay tuned, let's get to this video. Alright, so here are the part numbers. These are the rear, so that's the left and that's the right. And then these are the fronts. I'm not sure which one's which. I'll look them up on the computer and be able to tell you. I do know that the customer bought all these off of Rock Auto. So you can go to Rock Auto and buy all these on there. Alright, so to begin with, on this particular one, we have to remove the lug nuts. And these lug nuts, typically, if you have a stock Honda Element with factory wheels, they would have a 19 millimeter, but this one has aftermarket, which carries a key. And just use my Alright, then we can remove the wheel after you get your 5 lug nuts loose. Alright, so then once it comes to removing the strut on the bottom half here, we've got to remove the 2 bolts here that hold it to the spindle. We've got to remove the brake line, and we've got to remove the outer tie rod end. The bolt head is a 19, the nut is a 22 on these, and this bolt is a 12. This particular one does not have ABS, so I can't really show you where the ABS line would be. I think it would be attached to here, probably with a 10 millimeter. You'd probably take that off. And this one up here, on this particular one, is a 19 millimeter. I don't know if this tie rod end is factory or not, but it's a 19 millimeter. So you just have to remove this cotter pin first with a pair of pliers, and then we can get to this. All right, so I showed you which sizes we need for all these. So I'm just going to go ahead and knock all that out, just using my pliers. Remove this cotter pin. It's a 19 right here. All right, and then I like to get these off with my 2-pound sledgehammer. So don't take the nut all the way off, that way in case you miss, you don't hit the threads and mess them up. If you hit the nut, it's not gonna mess up the threads. So I can just put my arm behind the strut here, kind of push up on the tie rod end and hit it right on the old shock here. See, it pops it right up. All right, and then once it pops up, you take the nut the rest of the way off by hand, like so. Take my brake line off, and take this off. And sometimes when you're starting to bolt out like this, you can put your wrench, the open end, behind it while it's coming out. Alright, so everything on the bottom side of this one is disconnected now. Now I'm going to let the truck down and take the top hats off, the top bolts. But you can see this shock is loose. Try not to put too much tension on this brake line, so if it's putting too much tension on the brake line, move it back over. Guys, I know I'm on the opposite side of the vehicle now, but I also wanted to bring up one thing that I forgot to mention on the other side. Whenever you pull this out, make sure you don't pull it out too far as to pull out the inner cup of your axle. So, yeah. So, just may want to be conscious of that so that you don't mess up your axle. So I'll let it down real quick. So now I've got the hood open, and what we got to do is take out these 3 nuts. That one, and that one. Don't ever take the one out of the center. Okay, take the 3 14 millimeter. That's what they generally are. You can see a little better over here. Take these 14 millimeters out. And don't take that one out of the middle. So while I'm taking those out, I'm going to hold the shock under here. Just keep it from falling down, and then it'll come right out. All right, so now I got 2 loose. I'll probably want to get an extension. Anyway, now that I got 2 loose, I'll hold the shock, keep it from falling, while I take the 3rd bolt, or 3rd nut off. So now that we got the old one out, we can put the new one in. All right, so these particular shocks that we're putting on are Monroe Quick Struts. These are really nice units. They're bolt-on, ready to go, and no assembly required per se. So I really like that fact, as opposed to just replacing the shock and then leaving the old wore-out spring on there. So yeah, this is really easy and convenient to just buy the whole assembly, ready to go. Another thing on top of the strut, you see how that one's got the L for left, and it has the arrow. Now, I guess my thinking when I first saw the L with the arrow was the front would be towards the arrow, but it's actually towards the left side of the vehicle. So when it sits in there, this nut here, or this stud here, will go towards the front, and that goes towards the left side, the outside of the car. So, and make sure a little steering arm is toward the back of the car, just like the one we took off. So I'm gonna place this strut up in here. Start a couple of these nuts.
Got him!
All right, so once you get a couple rounds on the threads on those, you can just tighten them down. In my case, I'm gonna use my little impact, but you could use a ratchet. All right, that part up here is done. And then we'll raise the car and go back to the lower side. All right, so now that we've got the car lifted back up, just install these bolts. Make sure that your brake line is running on this side of the spindle and not like on the inside like this. Put it back together like you took it off, right? So I just kind of pushed up on that until I got that bolt go through there, and now the other one looks like it don't want to line up, but if you just push on it, until it lines up, piece of cake. Put these nuts back on it. Ha! Got him! Start your other bolt, or your bolt for your brake line. Start this nut on the tie rod end. This is a really simple job on this, guys. Really simple job. Just tighten it down a little bit. 19 millimeter. The tie rod ends don't have to be crazy tight. You can see I just bumped it with the impact, just where I can get my cotter pin in. Sometimes those cotter pins, when you use them, they mess up to the point of no return. All right, tighten these up. And then tighten the little brake line down. All right, if you had the ABS line, you put that back on. Everything you take off, make sure you put it back on. But see, this one right here is already done. So now just put the wheel back on. With these, they don't really have any adjustment in it. adjustment's going to be in the tie rod end. So, you know, just for the toe. We don't have any camber adjustment, no caster adjustment. It just one size fits all. So a lot of times I don't ever even get the alignment done. But I mean, that's up to you. If you feel like you need to get alignment, get alignment. So we completed the front driver side. Front passenger side's rinse and repeat. Same thing. So for the front, we use a 19 millimeter, 22 millimeter socket or wrench, whichever you choose. Then we also used a pair of pliers and 12 millimeter socket, a 14 millimeter socket. That's it. Not many tools really involved in that. So I guess that's going to conclude the front. And now let's do the rear. The rear shocks are different. I don't really know in which fashion, but you see this one has an L on it, and the one on the right has an R on it. So let's get this thing installed. So just like on the front, if it had regular wheels on it, it'd have a 19 millimeter nut for the lug nuts, but we have a key for this one. All right, and then we can remove the wheel. So here you can see our shock here, and there's a 17 millimeter going through right here. Now this is a 2-wheel drive model, so if you have a 4-wheel drive, it'll have an axle coming up through here, and it may make things slightly more difficult. I'm not really sure. This is a 2-wheel drive model, and it's what I've got to show you. So, but we got to take out this 17 millimeter bolt here. The nut is made on to the spindle, so you don't have to worry about that. Well, I say the spindle is the control arm, so you don't have to worry about holding a nut or anything like that on that. To access the top of the struts, we're going to need to go in the back here, and then we're going to use our flathead screwdriver. And you see I got the seat folded up on the side over here, out of the way. We need to get this little access door here up, and there's a little groove right at the bottom. Just pop it up and out, but there you can see the top of the shock and those two 14 millimeter nuts. So use our 14 millimeter socket and take those out. Make sure you leave that one on top of the strut alone. So we're just getting those two on each side. All right, so I got the two nuts off the top. Now I'm gonna see what I gotta do to get this out of here. To get this off, we got a 10 mil here. There's a 10 mil like right over here on this side. And there's a 10 mil like right up here. So I'm gonna take those three off. This should swing out enough to let the shock have clearance to get out. It don't look like on the passenger side that we're gonna have an issue getting the shock out once it gets to this point, because you don't have anything that's close proximity such as this. So I guess we'll get that out of the way and see what happens. So you can see that by dropping that evap thing down just a tad, it allowed me enough clearance to just be able to pull the shock out through here, no problem. And then like I was saying on the passenger side, there's really not anything to prevent you from pulling that shock right on out through here. So passenger side should be pretty straightforward. All right, so now I've got the new shock, and just put it right through here. Bolt holes lined up there. Let's see. This part may be a little tricky, not having a friend to help me out. Let's see. Alright, so I kind of got it jammed in there now. So I guess I'll go to the top side and put those two 14 millimeter nuts on, and then we'll get everything on the bottom side buttoned up. You can see where the studs are. I'm just going to put my two nuts back on those. Put all the trim piece back on. Just goes in the top and then clips in at the bottom. So now back to the bottom. take the shock loose over here, and that way the sway bar isn't fighting me. So the way it is now, the sway bar is attached to both lower control arms, right? And it's fighting me. So if I'm trying to pull down over here, this one's not letting it pull down because it's trying to push up. So if I can go ahead and take that shock loose, it'll make it a little easier and less fight. All right, so it looks like getting this bottom shock mount in, it's gonna be the toughest part of this whole job for sure. Maybe, just maybe. Woo-hoo. Yeah, baby. Sadly, I wish I knew a better way to tell you to do this part, but you saw it took me some finagling to get it done. Now I just gotta put this evap canister back up where it goes, and then we move on to the other side. All right, so the driver's side is now done. You saw the whole ordeal to get that bottom on. Now I'm just gonna do the passenger side, and hopefully it'll be a little bit better. Well, the passenger side didn't fight me quite as bad, but I got all the shocks on now. The lower bolt on the bottom is by far the worst part of this whole job with the front and rear combined. But now, last thing to do is put the wheel on and she's good to go. And I guess realistically on the rear, you can do it without taking the wheel off. I did the passenger side without taking the wheel off. It's just, last but not least, I'm gonna do sway bar bushings for the front. I know I didn't say that in the intro, but I'm going ahead and put some new OEM sway bar bushings on. They're same part number for both sides. Maybe you can see that. There you go. Same part number for both of them. And we'll need a 14 millimeter. This little cap's usually going on one way. Yeah, they do. They got there's a little arrow on the cap that points forward. So I just lay those on the ground, corresponding to which side they came off of. And these bushings, you can see they split, and the split goes towards the front. When we're looking at our new bushing, see it's got a flat surface that goes up, All right, and you see how it's split. So the split's going toward the front, so it's gonna go on just like this on the sway bar. All right, the same way over here. Flat surface goes up, slit goes towards the front, like that. You can barely see it right here in my thumb. That indicates going forward. So, anyways, we put it with that arrow going forward. All right, so once those are tightened down and the bushings are straight, that's all it is to it. Anyways, thanks for joining me on this episode. I hope to see you on another video in the future. Thanks for all the likes, the comments, and the subscribes. You guys have been killing it. We're almost 4,000 subs, so whenever we reach 5,000 subs, I'm going to be doing a gift card to Jason Waters Tuning. Jason offers dyno tuning, ECUs like S300s, K-Pros, clutches, intercoolers, turbo kits, pretty much anything that Speed Factory sells. Jason is a distributor for Speed Factory, so any of that kind of stuff you need. I know it probably won't cover a lot of stuff, you know, as far as your expenses, but hey, $300 is $300. So. Anyways, appreciate it, guys. See you on another one.